Hello and welcome to the second session in our video series based on the spiritual disciplines. In this session we'll be exploring the spiritual discipline of prayer. Prayer is the discipline that underpins all the others. If the others are flavours of the spiritual life, then prayer is the life-sustaining water to which they're added. We all have different experiences of prayer. Perhaps you're a prayer warrior, or perhaps you struggle with prayer. I know a struggle for me is when I find myself in a group situation where people are praying for a specific topic, and instead of engaging with other people's prayers, I find myself creating my own bit of poetry. I think the first line and the second line, and then I know I need that third line, which is like the hook, and it's going to make people go, yeah, and I get that feeling of affirmation, and then I find some great way to finish the prayer off. But then I realised that I spent the whole prayer time just creating my own bit of poetry instead of engaging with God and the prayers and petitions of other people. The aim of this session is to explore the spiritual discipline of prayer by thinking about new and different ways we can communicate with God. We'll explore how prayer is not a series of moments with God, but an ongoing conversation that lasts a lifetime. For this session, you will need paper and 2 pens of different colours. Take a moment to reflect on the following questions and pause the video. Prayer is the discipline that underpins all the others because it connects us directly to the heart of God. Prayer involves great and mysterious power. It's not about just speaking words into thin air. 1 John chapter 5 verses 14 to 15 says, "This is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know he hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have what we asked of him." Let's read 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verses 16 to 18, and then take a moment to reflect on the questions.
Be joyful always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus.
If we analyse the blueprint that Jesus lays out in Matthew chapter 6, we find a lot of subjects we should pray about. Confession, praise, requests, thanksgiving, but even that doesn't answer what prayer is. In Luke chapter 5, we read about Jesus healing a man with leprosy. As the word gets out about him and the crowds gather to celebrate him, Jesus turns and runs in the opposite direction. Verse 16 says he often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. So what does that tell us? That when things are happening around him, when the heat is on and everyone is running towards him saying, "This is your moment," he retreats. He doesn't run headfirst into the crowd of adoring fans. He withdraws, and we read that he often did this. He withdraws to pray, because for Jesus, prayer is home. Not just when things are tough, like in the Garden of Gethsemane, but also when things are good. Prayer is Jesus' default setting. He continually returns to it, because it's where he recharges and makes sense of things. We can learn a lot from this example. In his letter to the Ephesians, Paul talks about prayer not as something we go off and do, but as a constant state in which Christians should seek to find themselves. In chapter 6, he says, "Pray in the Spirit on all occasions and with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the saints." Just like the Thessalonians passage we've just read, Paul is suggesting prayer is an ongoing process. Changing our view of prayer from a series of moments to a continual journey is vital as we seek to engage with the spiritual disciplines. Prayer is an attitude, meaning we are always aware of God, beside us in every conversation, in every moment, and even in isolation. On your piece of paper, write down every way of communicating you can think of. It could be face-to-face, social networks, email, even semaphore. Pause the video and list every way of communicating you can think of. Here's my list of ways of communicating. I'm sure you've probably got a lot more. A young person on the Transformers course this year explained how they like to pray by email. If you've got a different colour pen or a highlighter, Highlight all the different ways of communicating which you could use to communicate with God through prayer. God doesn't have an email address, but that doesn't mean we can't use email to pray. God hears our prayers whether we write them, draw them, speak them, or post them on social media. We tend to think of prayer in quite a safe, limited way, perhaps just in a room or a few people gathered together saying words. But that's just one way of praying, and as we've already discussed, prayer isn't just a way of communicating, it's an ongoing journey and relationship with God. Next week, we're going to explore the spiritual discipline of study. But before I go, I'm going to leave you with one last activity. Take a moment to relax and be quiet and think about one of the two following things. First of all, the events or people or circumstances for which you are really thankful. Or on the other hand, for the situations or things you'd like to see changed or resolved. After a few minutes of silent contemplation, take your pen and your paper and just in a prayerful attitude, draw a picture or write a letter to God. Use this as a time of prayer and reflect on it over the coming week and shape your prayers around it.